Here are some 8 oddly specific signals and signs of anxious attachment. Now, you might be a little freaked out as you listen to this because previously you likely thought that these were unique to you or something that only you did. But actually, these are pretty common struggles of many of us who are anxiously attached. So, this is how I'm going to structure this video. First, I'll go over each one and sort of explain a little bit about how it shows up. And then at the end, I'm also going to share some treatment recommendations for how you could begin approaching them so that you can move towards healing. All right, so let's get into it. The first one is the idea of limerence. Limerence is the giving up of yourself for someone else, feeling so enamored with them, feeling in awe of them, wanting to be around them, seeing them as sort of the knight in shining armor, the person that will solve our pain, the person that will finally give us the feeling of unconditionally being loved and accepted. And we imagine somewhat of a perfect future with this person, right? And as time goes on, we notice they disappoint us, right? In some ways. And that's when we may start fawning, or we may start what I call chameleoning. Basically, we change ourselves according to the other person's, what we think, at least, the other person's moods and preferences are day to day. And it also can lead to lack of boundaries, where we previously had a minimum standard for certain things, but once we're in fawning limerence mode, we give up those standards in the name of love. So that is a big sort of something all of us with anxious attachment at some point or the other have experienced being in relationships with this kind of energy, right? The second one is a deep feeling of unworthiness. This is something I struggled with for a long time. I still do sometimes. And the only difference is now I have the tools to be able to catch myself and to bring myself back. But for a long time, I would be overtaken with a sense of unworthiness. And the way this plays out is the sense that you have gotten a catch. You found someone who's such a catch that you should be lucky, right? And sometimes it's amplified by other people, right, who might tell you, maybe it's your mom or your friend who tells you, oh my God, he's such a catch. Oh my God, she's so awesome. And so this idea suddenly of, oh my gosh, this person is so great. Everyone else sees their greatness. I feel off here, or I'm longing for something. But since I also think they're amazing, and so do other people, it must be because I am unworthy. Something is off about me. Something is a little bit unlovable about me, right? And that sensation is something that most of us with anxious attachment carry with us, whether we're in relationship or out of relationships. So this can be even with friendships, at work, when someone compliments something we're wearing or something that we did at work, our mind tends to come up with, oh, that's just because of so and so and so and this and this and this. If only they knew, right? If only they knew the real truth, then they would see me for the imposter that I am, or the not so smart or capable person that I am. This little suspicion is always something that we carry around, whether we're in romantic partnerships or not. The third one is kind of a opposite of the unworthiness. We carry that unworthiness wound, but the way we manage that unworthiness is actually projecting a self-image of being pure and unconditionally loving and giving, and innocent, morally superior almost, right? And we truly believe it, right? So which makes it really hard for us to be able to see our own faults or how we may affect or impact or come across to someone else. All we can see truly is our good intentions. But we have a hard time seeing somebody else's intentions as being good. I often say we end up judging our actions based on the context, but someone else's actions as a character fault, right? So if I'm running late for work, it's because I had to do everything in the morning and take care of the kids, and then I spilled something and I wanted to be presentable because I wanted the best for my company in this presentation. So I stopped at Target and changed my clothes. And we have a lot of context for, and they're all true. But when someone else is making mistakes, we can't quite see the context, and we see them as doing it intentionally or having some sort of a character defect. Number 4, shifting standards. This is something I smile because my partner, when we first started our relationship about 8 years ago, pointed this out to me. And it was, I honestly have to say, I hadn't quite seen it like that before. And it really was mind-blowing for me that, oh my gosh, that's true. But it was in my blind spot, right? So this idea of shifting standards is the idea that we're seeking a certain feeling from somebody. We want them to say things a certain way. We have a script in our mind. We've actually imagined that scene or that conversation in our minds in this perfect way. And obviously the other person is not us, and so they do it their own way, and often it doesn't quite meet our expectations. And so in our mind, it's because that person didn't do it right that I'm not getting that satisfying feeling that I'm so longing for and yearning for, desperate for actually. I'm suffering. I really want and need this feeling. I believe this person can give it to me. And yet, why won't they do it the way that I've imagined it? It's so simple. It's not much to ask. And this person is not, it's because of them that I'm not having this feeling, right? Here's the catch though. When they do even come close to that standard we have in our head, it still doesn't satisfy the feeling. So then we're confused. So then what we do is we shift the standard. We tell them, well, if you had said it with the right tone, if you had said it before I sent that second text, if you had said it, in front of your mom and not after she left, if you had said it, before we got married, you only said it after we got married because you can't leave me anyway. It's like shifting standards that makes it almost impossible for the other person to win. And it's not because we're trying to make them lose. In fact, we desperately want them to win with us, right? The problem is, even when they come close, it doesn't seem to give us that feeling. So in our minds, our mind tells us that it must be because they haven't done this one extra thing. This, the thing that they missed is the thing that would have made the difference. And for the person on the other side, it feels like the standards are always shifting. They try and they come close to meeting one, and then the standards move over here. You should have done it this way, though. You should have said it that way, though. And so shifting standards is what the other person feels. But what we're feeling is a desperation for a sense of completion, a sense of being seen and understood, a sense of unconditional love. And that feeling is fleeting, which is why the standards change. Number 5, hypersensitivity to scanning for abandonment, possible abandonment. Now, here's the thing. I don't know if you've had this experience. I certainly have. Whenever you buy a new car, or even let's say you buy a new bag, right? And you say to yourself, wow, this is an unusual color. It's unique. I'm going to get this car or this bag or this pair of glasses or whatever. And then the next thing you know, over the next 10 days, you seem to see it everywhere. And you're like, did everybody get this memo? Why is this particular model like more prevalent on the streets now? Why does that person also have this specific tortoise shell colored glasses, right? So this is because our reticular activating system is always scanning for something that we are aware of. Once it comes to our awareness, then it starts scanning the environment for that thing. And so we see more of it. Until then, we actually still, it's there on the streets and still the same people are wearing those glasses. You just don't even notice it. It goes over your head. This is the same for everybody, right? because we can't pay attention to every single thing. Otherwise, we'd be paralyzed with the amount of incoming information to our nervous systems. So our reticular activating system picks and chooses things that are relevant and important and useful for us, depending on what we're thinking of, depending on what's top of mind for us. Well, for anxious attachers like us, abandonment and possibility of abandonment is top of mind. Rejection, not being prioritized, not being included is so top of mind that our reticular activating system says, okay, I'll go to work for you. I'll find every situation that might vaguely resemble the thing that you are thinking about and is top of mind for you. It is how the human brain is set up, right? And that gets us in trouble because whatever we look for, we will find. And whatever we find, we will make it mean that they are rejecting us and they're intentionally not including us, and that we are an outcast, or that we're an imposter, or that we don't belong, right? Or that this person is, not being truthful, fully, deeply, intimately truthful. Have you had that experience too? That feeling of they're not giving me that total heart. They're not fully in there, right? So this hypersensitivity to potential abandonment is only because it's top of mind, and our reticular activating system just keeps giving us cues and we keep making it mean that, which is very hard, right? To constantly be seeing these situations. And this is why anxious attachers genuinely believe that they are being singled out in some way for rejection or for being not included. The sixth one is we tend to exaggerate our emotional pain, or we tend to create mini crises over and over in order to keep the intensity of the feeling between us and the other person high enough for us to feel like there's depth there, right? So sometimes that can feel like it's better to be arguing back and forth, and that intensity and the crying and the yelling feels better than just a flatlining, because a flatlining is, right next to losing the relationship, right? So the exaggeration is, again, not something, at least when I was exaggerating, and I still catch myself sometimes and I have to rein it in. But when I did that, or when I feel pulled towards that now, it's not because I'm thinking, let me exaggerate just to, make up something. I genuinely, the intensity of my pain is so much for me that the only way that I can convey that pain and the depth of it and the razor sharpness of it in my heart is to a little bit blow it out of proportion, because otherwise it feels like the other person just doesn't get it. They don't understand. And I've got to feel that intensity for me to be sure that there's something special, even if it's turbulence. We're connected because we're turbulently in each other's lives. We can't quite let go because there's something special here, and we just need to figure it out, right? So exaggerating pain or creating mini crises is something that I have done more than my fair share of. Again, it was a reflection of the pain that I was feeling. Number 7 is this might really come as a shock. It did for me when I figured it out, is that despite anxious attachers really wanting and asking and demanding and complaining about intimacy and the lack of intimacy, we actually are afraid of true intimacy. Okay, let me tell you what I mean. Intimacy, in the way I think about it, is into me, you see. It is a real-time attuning of two people and their nervous systems and their thoughts and longings and fears in any moment. When I come as an anxious attacher into a conversation, I usually have already a script in my mind about what true intimacy would look like and what the best outcome for that conversation would look like. And because I already have that in my mind, I actually cannot be fully present to the human being in front of me. I don't have patience. I don't allow for silences. I don't pause. I don't try to understand where the other person is coming from, right? And so my desperate need for this intimacy that I've conjured up in my mind is so high that I actually run away from true intimacy, which is the real moment by moment meeting and being with of another person who is imperfect, who has completely different views sometimes and opinions and needs and longings and values than us. And not being perfectly aligned is so painful that I compare it and get stuck in the script that I have in my mind. So anxious attachers, we so want intimacy, but we actually block true intimacy. It's really sad, right? It's like chasing our own tails. All right, and then the final one, and the eighth one here, is because we tend to have really strong feelings and we fear abandonment. It almost feels like, at least for me, it used to feel like I might die if I don't hear from this person, if I don't feel reassured, if, we might end up breaking up, if the other person even feels energetically like they're pulling away or they're distant. I would feel my stomach dropping and this wave of nausea almost, right? So because it feels so uncomfortable, horrible, actually, like any sane human being, we want to try to make ourselves feel better. So what are we going to do? We are going to try to pursue this person in order to try to get some resolution, some reassurance, some calming for our nervous system. But the way we do that ends up violating another person's boundaries sometimes. Here's some of the things that I used to do. Okay. I would text the other person nonstop, blocks and blocks of explanation and revealing and analysis, right? Number two, I would follow my partner from room to room, trying to finish the conversation, which, never ended well, because clearly the person is going to another room because they need space. And that was too much of an alarm bell for me, so I follow them. Another thing is I have in the past tried to stop someone from leaving the room. Not physically, I've never hurt anyone physically. No one's ever hurt me physically. However, I would block someone and beg them and try to plead with them. No, you can't just walk away. You're abandoning me. And in my mind, I believed it. I would say, you're being abusive by not talking through this. So you have to talk through this however long it takes. And I would stop people from leaving. And the final thing, again, I have done this, and this one other people have done to me as well, is threatening to hurt ourselves. And I'll say this again, when I threatened, in my mind, it was not a threat. Okay, in my mind, it was a combination of the depth of the feeling and pain I was feeling and the loudest cry for help that I could make. So in that way, it was actually a survival mechanism, not a mechanism to try to end my life. It was a mechanism for survival, but it would come out to the other person as threatening to hurt ourselves, which feels, and I've been on the receiving end of this, feels manipulative, right? So these 8 signs, if any of these feel familiar to you, maybe many of them do, all of these I have done at one point or another in my journey to go from insecurely attached to securely attached. I had and still tend to be pulled towards disorganized attachment, which has both the avoidance and the anxious, preoccupied side to it. It's kind of a double whammy. And so I've experienced both sides, and I've experienced what it takes. Honestly, talk therapy did not do it for me. There were certain tools that I had to pull together from different Eastern wisdom practices and Western neuroscience and all of these things in order to move towards secure attachment, which I'll share with you in subsequent videos. But here is some ways to start approaching healing if you resonated with any of these 8 signs. Number 1, learning how to tolerate some discomfort. One of the things that I teach my clients now is the idea of connection being a pendulum. Have you seen a grandfather clock with a pendulum, right? It swings back and forth, and there's a point at which it goes to one extreme, stops, and then swings back. Connection and intimacy is not a constant state. When it's working, when it's perfectly working, it is a pendulum. A pendulum actually has connection and disconnection, right? You come together and then you move apart, and sometimes there's some misunderstanding, and then you repair and come together and move apart, and there's some discomfort there. It is a swinging back and forth. It is not a static state, which I'm repeating this because I really did believe that if you were truly connected to someone else, it should be a constant state. And so when it wasn't, it seemed like something was really wrong with the relationship. But actually, what was happening inside of me was that I didn't realize that that's part of two people dancing together. So this pendulum of connection and disconnection requires that when there is the natural swing to some disconnection, that I learn how to take space and emotionally regulate myself. This is a number one skill that all of us with insecure attachment have to learn, which is going from dysregulation to regulation. That's the number one first thing you need to learn. Even if you're avoidant because you don't know what to do with your emotions. You don't know how to name your emotions. You don't know how to connect with somebody else's emotions. And so you do the repeated cycle of disappearing in order to not feel overwhelmed by someone else's demands, which is also lack of emotion regulation, right? So that's the number one thing, is knowing that it's a pendulum and learning to take space and learning tools for emotional regulation. Number two is healing core wounds. There's a whole other training I will do on healing core wounds. But in short, every insecure attachment has some core wounds, right? And there are several that insecure attachers, anxious attachers might have, but a couple of them that often come up over and over that I had and several of my clients have talked about is the wound of I will be abandoned and the wound of I'm never a priority / I am alone or will not be seen or cared for, right? Something along those lines. So I will be abandoned. I'm not seen, cared for. I'm not a priority. You have to go first thing though is not healing the core wound. First thing is emotional regulation, okay? Because you can't even touch the core wound if you don't know how to manage your own emotions. So that's the first step. Then we move to healing core wounds, and there's a process for doing that. This is akin to healing a broken bone instead of just putting a Band-Aid on it. When I was in talk therapy on and off for like 15 years, it helped temporarily, right? It's like cleaning up a wound and putting a Band-Aid on it and giving you a pain shot. It does help temporarily, but the bone underneath is still broken. So the pain comes back in another form, with another relationship, in another situation, it comes back. So healing the core wound is getting to the real core issue and mending it from the foundation up. Number three, when you've done number 1 and 2, now you have the tools to be able to admit to your own struggles and mistakes. You can't even see them, nor will you have the steadiness to be able to admit to them in conversation, especially in sensitive conversations. Only when you've done step 1 and 2, you will even be able to see, oh, I can be a perfectly imperfect person, just like any other human being, and these are my blind spots, okay? And then you will have the steadiness to be able to share that with somebody else without feeling an overpowering of shame that shuts us down. Number 4, the fourth step, is learning to speak nuanced truth, okay? As anxious attachers, we tend to, as I said, exaggerate things and paint them as a sort of a black and white, where we are the innocent bystanders or even victims, and the other person is the perpetrator. When you've gone through the first 3 steps, then you can speak nuanced truth, which is, these are the facts, and this is the feeling that came up within me. This is what it reminded me of in my own past, and this is what I made it mean. And you can have conversations that take into account both people's core fears and core needs. That's an advanced move. It sounds simple, but it's very hard to do, as you know, in the moment. So that's why we need to go through the first 3 steps in order to get to this step. And finally, number 5, super crucial to build your own tribe. Many anxious attachers, despite really priding themselves on being unconditional and giving and emotionally aware, we tend to struggle with having several varied friendships, right? We might have one or two people, but the others, we have a hard time really feeling understood or feeling like that we truly belong. We're not sure if they really, really like us. Okay, so the final step is actually building your own community and learning how to navigate co-regulation at different levels of intimacy so that we don't rely on just one or two people who have known us for a long time and who are super close to us. We need those people, but we also need the next layer, the next circle where we're somewhat close to and we have fun with and we have hobbies and shared interests with, but we're not best friends with. And then we have another circle where they are well-wishers and acquaintances and we would, be there for them if they needed something and vice versa. But that's the level of interest. So we need a tribe. That's what secure attachers do, which always used to confound me earlier on until I did the first 4 steps. And then I was able to create that community and tribe for myself. So these are the 5 steps to begin to heal your insecure attachment to secure attachment. Now, the final thing I'll say here is that I spent many years listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos, reading books. And there was a time where I felt like I was learning a lot, but I wouldn't, looking back, call that a true transformation. The reason being, I didn't actually implement or try anything in my real life. The only way that you know you've truly learned something is when your behavior changes, even by 1 teeny tiny percent. Even if it is just a drop, even if you could only do it a drop, and then you couldn't do it at all for another 2 weeks, and then you did a drop. Those drops of actual behavior change. Again, this may look like just I paused for 10 seconds before I blurted out or got angry. No one else might notice that, but you know that usually you would only pause for maybe 0 seconds or 2 seconds, but now you're pausing for 10 seconds. That is a drop of change. There's got to be some tiny, teeny, tiny drop of behavior change, which means you've got to take what I shared in this video, if anything resonated with you, to go do it and try it and come and share in the comments what you got from it, what happened, and what you are going to do as your next teeny tiny drop. That's how transformation happens. So with that, we will link in the next video or in the show notes how you can work with us if you would like, in order to slowly move from any insecure attachment or any relationship push and pull that you might be in, whether it's marriage or any other intimate relationships, and how to move it to a secure, happy relationship in just 10 minutes a day. That is what we do. Our tools are so simple that you can do it in 10 minutes a day. We'll link all those details in the show notes, and we'll also link some more videos on secure attachment and relationship health. All right, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.